Democrats are split over whether to redouble their efforts to win back the industrial heartland, or turn their attention to more demographically promising states like Georgia and Arizona. Des Moines, at the very first event of her first full day in Iowa as a presidential candidate, Senator Kamala Harris was greeted by a Democratic voter who delivered a pointed recommendation about the best path to the White House. The voter, Rahul Parsa, who teaches at Iowa State University's business school, said he told Ms. Harris at a gathering of Asian and Latino activists that she needs to think of the Democratic Party in the Midwest like a struggling retail business, and that she should seek out not just the regular customers, but those who are not loyal supporters as well. Kamala needs to find out why the people voted for Trump, what are their issues, said Mr. Parsa, adding that he had one overarching demand for the burgeoning field of would-be nominees: you need to bring some states in the Midwest. As the Democratic race takes flight, with one or more candidates entering the race almost every week, Mr. Parsa's viewpoint represents one side of a long-simmering debate within the party. Should Democrats redouble their efforts to win back the industrial heartland that effectively delivered the presidency to Donald J. Trump, or turn their attention to more demographically promising Sun Belt states like Georgia and Arizona? With polls indicating that electoral viability is as important to voters as any policy issue, a handful of the party's prospects are already holding up their Midwestern credentials to make the case that they are the ones who can turn Big Ten country, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, blue again. Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota went immediately to next-door Wisconsin after declaring her candidacy earlier this month, making a hard-to-miss point about her eagerness to compete in a state Hillary Clinton never visited in the 2016 general election. Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, who has not officially entered the race, used his first Iowa trip to make a beeline for a county that went for former President Barack Obama by over 20 points in 2012 but fell to Mr. Trump by about the same margin 4 years later. And a central premise of former Vice President Joseph R. Biden Jr.'s potential candidacy is that the Scranton-born Democrat would be the political mason best able to reconstruct the party's so-called Midwestern blue wall. Yet far away from the mounting snowdrifts that line every curb here, there is a growing school of thought that Democrats should not spend so much time, money and psychic energy tailoring their message to a heavily white, rural and blue-collar part of the country when their coalition is increasingly made up of racial minorities and suburbanites. The party should still pursue voters who have drifted toward Republicans, this thinking goes, but should also place a high priority on mobilizing communities more amenable to progressive politics. The numerical swap between the three Rust Belt states that handed Mr. Trump the White House and the most alluring trio of Sun Belt targets is nearly even. Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin have a combined 46 electoral votes, while North Carolina, Georgia and Arizona offer 42. And an aspirational reach state like Texas would offer a larger trove of electoral votes for Democrats than the combined total of Ohio and Iowa, states that have started to slip away from the party. The dispute is not merely a tactical one, it goes to the heart of how Democrats envision themselves becoming a majority party. The question is whether that is accomplished through a focus on kitchen table topics like health care and jobs, aimed at winning moderates and disaffected Trump voters, or by unapologetically elevating matters of race and identity, such as immigration, to mobilize young people and minorities with new fervor. Julian Castro, the former federal housing secretary and mayor of San Antonio who is running for the Democratic nomination, said reclaiming the Midwest should be Democrats' top priority. He said Mr. Trump had plainly failed voters there, whether it's been on trade or the loss of jobs at GM. But Mr. Castro also urged the party to stretch the electoral map far deeper into Republican territory, suggesting that, with the right candidate, Democrats could deal Mr. Trump a crippling blow by turning even Texas blue. The Sun Belt is clearly turning against him, Mr. Castro said of the president, adding, I do think candidates that can connect with growing, diverse states like Arizona, Texas, Florida and Georgia, it makes a big difference. Mr. Castro cited his own historic status to suggest he could do just that. Among other things, I'm young, and, as a groundbreaking Latino candidate, I'm convinced that the turnout out there in the Latino community will go through the roof. Stacey Abrams, the Georgia Democrat who narrowly lost the governorship there last year and is considering a Senate bid next year, was even blunter. The accelerating diversity of the new American majority demands a fresh approach to winning elections, which will yield more representative leadership and policies that serve all, said Ms. Abrams, adding that our electorate must be built on infrequent voters who share our values. But the suggestion that Democrats should de-emphasize what has long been the preeminent battleground in presidential politics is enough to rouse deep anger among officeholders in the Midwest. It drives me crazy, said Gov. Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, who rolled to an easy victory last year in a state Mr. Trump narrowly won. To put any particular part of the country into a general classification and write them off is ridiculous. Ms. Whitmer said she won by going into areas most Democrats wouldn't spend their time going. She added, "You show up at a bowling alley. To other Democrats in the region, it is not just a matter of showing up. The approach to policy matters, too." In contrast to those on the left who say the only way to win is to energize progressives with an ambitious agenda, Governor Tony Evers of Wisconsin said the party would do best in his state with a pragmatic candidate who recognized that dramatic policy proposals, like free college and Medicare for all, were aspirational goals rather than do-or-die demands. "I think Wisconsin is very winnable," Mr. Evers said. "But it has to be someone that speaks to the issues but also is viewed as rational." Asked if the Upper Midwest represented Democrats' fastest route back to the White House, Mr. Evers, a soft-spoken former state education official, answered with a twinkle-eyed smile. "Hell yes," he said.